Welcome aboard, everyone. We're really pleased you've come and joined us today. I'm Simon Walker, and I'm the co-lead of the PM Society Careers Interest Group. And my colleague, Alex Merckx, is also the co-lead. So we're really delighted to welcome you here today. First question I'd like to ask you all, though, is hands up if you're still in university. That's really good to hear. Hands up if you've recently graduated. Hands up if you're working and you're thinking, I'd like to try something else. That's really interesting.
Nice.
And hands up if there are some of you that still don't know exactly what you want to do, but you thought you'd come along today just to see what this interesting industry is about. That's really good, really good.
I thought there'd be more.
Yes, I think we did, actually. I think we did. Well, we're really pleased that you can all join us today. Now, I would imagine some of you don't know what the Pharmaceutical Marketing Society is. So we're just going to give you a quick overview of what we do. Pharmaceutical Marketing Society is really there to to promote the excellence of communication in the world of healthcare and how that can lead to better health outcomes for people. We support organisations and people in healthcare communications. We recognise the excellence and we promote best practice within the industry, and we provide education and development to support people looking to enter in the industry, hence today's event. And that is where we are here today.
Great. So today is all about exploring your options, helping to demystify, I hope, the world of healthcare communications and give you a feel for what the industry is and whether there are any roles that might suit you in this industry. So I hope that you do find that there are. So we've got a great lineup of speakers today who are going to talk you through their experiences and provide you with some advice and information to help you to identify the ideal role for you. We're going to try and keep it relatively informal and relaxed today. We're not going to be sort of talking at you and presenting at you too much. We're trying to make it quite sort of just informal, and we're going to have chats, give you the opportunity to ask people questions, get you moving around, and it'll be quite an interactive day, I think, where you get the opportunity to move from one role to the next and explore them and get to know them. So this is the agenda. Which I'll keep referring back to every now and then, but there is a QR code there as well, and that'll take you to a page on the PM Society website where you can also see, if you scroll, you have to scroll quite far down to the bottom of the page, but there is the agenda there as well, so you can follow what's going on. And then I did have a nice slide for housekeeping, but thankfully the fire has been covered off, so I think all I'd say is, it'd be great if you can put your phone on silence. I have to do the same. So, but other than that, just enjoy the day.
And now I've got the pleasure of introducing you to our first guests, Caroline Benson. And Caroline is the co-founder of the award-winning healthcare agency, Cutsy & Cutsy. And I'm also delighted to welcome Claudia Coelho, who has an absolutely successful career in the pharmaceutical industry. She's worked for such companies as Pfizer and Novartis, and I'm sure you've all heard of them. She's now the chief and co-founder of Possible, which is a strategic healthcare consultancy. And we're going to spend some time with Caroline and Claudia today to ask them a few questions about the industry, really to kick things off. And so, welcome aboard. So, we're going to ask a few questions, but first of all, Caroline, could you tell us how you came into the industry, please? Give you a
microphone. Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone, welcome. It's great to see so many people. So you will hear a very common theme today. I fell into the industry, didn't even know it existed. And that's why I'm so passionate about getting people to know about it, because it's a great industry to work in. I was studying for a PhD and trying to write up, and obviously had no money, which those of you who have been students know what it's like. I was offered a freelance job where I went and managed an exhibition stand for a pharma company in Budapest. Thought, ooh, this sounds amazing. Went and did that. It was about women's health. And I project managed this exhibition stand, got on really well with the clients, and that's how I started. Came back, client told the lady that owned the agency that they really liked me, and then she offered me a job. So I was very, very lucky that way. And so I started as a project manager in that agency. I stayed in the same agency the whole time. Not everyone does that. It was family run, like my own business, and got lots of opportunities. Put in hard work, you get out. There's a tip for you. What you put in, you get back out. People will reward you if you work hard. And so worked my way up, became account manager, then became client strategy director. And then back in 2011, my brother and we got bought by a big American network. And it became less about the people and much more about the bottom line and hitting targets, and less about people as individuals and improving people's healthcare. That was my opinion, and that was my experience. Other people have got different experience of working in network agencies. And we bit the bullet, handed our notice in, and set up our own agency in 2011. My brother's the creative brains, and my background is client service. So back then, there was just him and me at the end of his garden, in the shed, trying to get clients, and we were lucky. I ended up working in-house at one of my old clients for about 6 months, which gave me a great insight into the pharma world, and everything else that's on your client's plate. And now we are about 50, I think we just employed our 50th person, which I'm very proud of. We've got a great team. Some of the guys are out there. I will say my agency's out there, but there are a lot of other agencies out there. And for us, today is not a competition. It's about sharing information about the industry. So talk to anyone, talk to everyone, be a sponge. And that's me.
That's really interesting. Claudia, would you like to tell us how you came into the industry?
Sure. I was thinking about this, and I started in the year 2000, which feels like a long time ago. And does anyone know why the year 2000 was so relevant or important or is kind of stamped in history?
Yeah, Y2K, Millennium Book.
Exactly, Y2K. Do the young people in the room even know what Y2K means? So anyway, we all thought that the world was going to end, planes were going to fly out of the sky and drop because our computers couldn't handle the change from 1999 to 2000. And thus the importance of really good communication and verified information. But how do I start it? I also kind of fell into it. I actually wanted to be a veterinarian. And as you can tell by my accent, I'm not British, I'm Canadian, Portuguese Canadian, that's the name. And I realized while working at the veterinary hospital and paying my way through my degree in biomedical science that the veterinary world was not about the medicine you could practice, it was what about people were willing to pay. And in a socialized medicine country like Canada, like the UK, because we don't see how much things cost, people are usually not willing to pay for very much. So I decided to keep animals as my hobby, and I thought, what am I going to do? Because I don't want to be in a lab all day. How many of you have that feeling? You know, yeah? Don't want to be behind Petri dishes and, handling, all these lab procedures, pipettes, etc. And a friend of mine had gotten a sales job at GSK. And she said, have you thought about the pharma industry? Because it's quite fun. Now, this is not the case anymore, but she's like, you get all this free swag, and we get to travel everywhere, and we go and get these samples that are in our garages, and they send us all this free stuff to give to doctors and all this stuff. And I thought, wow, this sounds interesting. So I literally applied to any job I saw posted by a pharmaceutical company and peripheral industries, not knowing what they meant. So one of those jobs I applied to talked about protocols. I was like, I didn't even know what a protocol was. No idea. Talked about, clinical trials, and it talked about all of these different things. But I applied anyway, went to the interview, blagged my way through it, and got the job. And the job was we were a central lab for pharmaceutical companies that were running clinical trials. And Pfizer was my client, funny enough. And that's kind of how I started, but very quickly then moved in to Novartis on the research side, so being a CRA, which was a clinical auditor. So when they're running their clinical trials, you want to audit the patient data. So that was super interesting and very privileged to have a first kind of row seat to patient information and seeing what patients really go through. Then progressed through there and then got brought to Europe, based in Italy in a regional role, heading up clinical operations across 10 countries. Lots of travel, lots of interesting things, seeing clinical trials running from, high-tech Switzerland to just starting in clinical trials, Romania and Bulgaria. So a really diverse kind of skill set. And then, the company was like, well, we think that, you've got leadership potential and we want to put you on a leadership development program, but that means going to the commercial side of the business. And I thought, oh, this sounds great, because clinical was wonderful and it applied a lot of the knowledge I had learned in university, but I always felt like I was missing the bigger picture. I was only, involved in a small amount of what a pharmaceutical company does, which is research and produce medicines. But then how do they actually reach the customers and the clinicians, et cetera? So then I moved to the UK to do a little stint in sales, and I absolutely loved it, especially because I was selling the drugs that I had been researching. So I knew the data like no one else, so I was very credible in front of the customers and therefore very effective and very valued. And then went on to marketing and started working on there and launching a lung cancer drug. And then eventually Pfizer came knocking because I had been recommended by a client, by a customer, by a clinician. So Pfizer came knocking and I thought, I'll go and do that for a while, and was head of marketing and digital there, and then became chief of staff, et cetera. And then finally, after many rounds of redundancies at Pfizer, I thought I need to get off of this redundancy wheel and wanted to take charge more of my own destiny because I loved the work. I didn't love the politics of a big organization. Nothing about Pfizer, it's just big organizations in general. And then I decided that I wanted to set up my own business. But I first wanted to learn, how do you do this? So I went and worked for an agency it was supposed to be a year, but then COVID hit. So I ended up staying there 2 years. And then started my consultancy with an ex-colleague from Novartis. And we focus on strategy, so marketing strategy and capability building, especially around marketing and commercial effectiveness. And that's where I am today, all these years later.
So, Caroline, given that there's probably quite a lot of people in the room who are really new to the healthcare communications industry, perhaps didn't even know that the industry existed until until very recently, how would you, say, in a couple of minutes, describe what the healthcare communications industry is?
That's a big task. But so I think we're very much a support for the pharma industry. We support them with their communications. Is that working?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could hear myself louder in that one. Sorry. So a lot of it is stakeholder engagement. There are lots and lots of different roles. So I think that's the thing about today, especially when we get to what we call sort of the speed dating part. Talk to as many people about the different roles. If you like research, you might be in a lab but don't actually like being a lab, but you like the research, you like the data. There's roles for you, there's strategic roles, there's client service, there's marketing, advertising, there's compliance is a huge thing within our industry and making sure we're compliant. Regulatory, and something that's quite close to my heart is patient engagement, and that's something we focus on, making sure that patients are involved and the patient voice is involved in the development of drugs, and that has a big impact because at the end of the day, the person that knows the impact of that disease is the person that has that disease, you can presume, but it's actually involving people in that. It is a crucial industry, and it is. I was going to say it's fun. You meet a lot of amazing people, and from all walks of life that come into, and I think that will come out later in some of the conversations that we're going to have.
Great. And then Claudia, maybe I could pass on to you. What's the point of healthcare communications? So what's the output that we're trying to achieve in the industry? I know that that's not an easy question either.
No, I guess, I mean, partly the clue is in the name. It's about communication, but what does that mean? And I think for us, especially if you follow the pharmaceutical industry and you're trying to understand the current trends, it's all about adding value, right? So if you go back a few years, I think the ethos when it was a different approach, back to the giving lots of free stuff away, it was let's try and persuade and push and compete. I think there's been a realization that that's not the way to actually add value to customers, and it's about personalized value. So it's understanding what matters to that customer, to that patient, depending on the area that you're working in, but not only what are their interests, what are their challenges that they're trying to overcome, and then what are the solutions that you have as a pharmaceutical company that can support in overcoming those challenges. And then, communication is one of the channels that you use in order to add value, because, clinicians are so busy and they can't access every paper or every latest development that happens. And this is where the companies come into play in bringing that information and helping with education and running specific programs like, nurse education programs or junior doctors or preceptorships of really high standard key opinion leaders, the best of the best in a certain area. How do you then make them accessible to other clinicians that may not have access? So if you're working, I don't know, at a small district general hospital here in the UK, and you're treating a really rare disease patient that you have no idea what's happening with this patient, the pharmaceutical company, with the support of all of these agencies and consultancies, can actually create a bridge and a conduit for that information, all for the benefit of patients. So the companies that are doing really well are the ones that have understood this, that it's about personalized value. And this is not marketing like, someone is trying to push you to buy a Kit Kat or an Apple iPhone. It's a different type of marketing. Some of the same principles and rules apply, and this is why, we have the capability side of our business, because it's important to understand the fundamental rules of marketing and the strategies and the frameworks, but then how you apply it in pharmaceuticals is very different.
Can I just add, I think, that's also, at the end of the day, we're all trying to improve patient outcomes and public health, and that's what really we're about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great ambition. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we'd like to open the floor up now for any questions. So my friends here, Julia and Rachel, are going to be parading the auditorium with the mics. So put your hands up if you have any questions.
Hello, panel. Thanks for your career insights. I guess healthcare comms is going digital in the last couple of years, but how do you reach patients who are not digital natives, like my mom, for example?
So that is the holy grail for us as comms agencies. I'm going to talk from personal experience. Patient engagement has been something that's been talked about for a very, very long time, and it is now becoming embedded in what people do. I think it's a huge challenge. We try and do a lot. I mean, there's a lot of desk research. We're like with digital, there's a lot of research we can now do. There's a lot of data out there that we can analyse to find out where these people are, and that outreach to find them. But, it is also about contacting relatives as well. Or, I'm of the age where I've got a teenage daughter and my mum's 80. So I'm managing upwards and downwards. So it's about trying to reach everybody and not just those individuals. But yeah, that's one of my big challenges at the moment. So,
If I can just add, so one of the things that we really focus on always is starting with the patient journey. Yeah. So you understand what is the patient journey, not only from a clinical perspective, which I think that's the first approach that people take. It's like, oh, this is the tests they have to do, this is the diagnosis, then they get this drug or that drug. But actually understanding what does it even take for the patient to get to in front of the first doctor. And then who are all the stakeholders involved? Because sometimes there's carers, sometimes there's, other people around. And then just like the clinicians, what are the pain points? What are the challenges? What are the needs? And then addressing them bespoke. Because you're right, there's a lot of talk about digital. There's a lot of talk about omni-channels. That's the biggest buzzword in pharma, which just makes me laugh because, we can't truly do omni-channel in pharma. There's many reasons for that, but we can't. But everybody likes to talk about it. But it's, even when you're talking about omni-channel or linking multiple channels, it's not just digital, right? Even a piece of paper that goes through the post. I was talking to a client actually last week saying, have you tried regular mail? That works really well, So it's it's personalizing, back to the personalized value. It's not, oh yeah, we're going to do a website for everyone, because that's not going to work.
I think it'd be really interesting to ask Alex, because Alex actually works for a patient engagement agency. And you'll have some good insights, I would have thought.
Yeah, although I was just agreeing with everything that Claudia's just said. So I think I would have said the same thing, but research with the patients, with the patient audience is absolutely right. And actually, when you're researching with the patient audience, making sure that you are researching a diverse group as well. So not just talking to, your mum and your dad and the people that, people in the company know, because of course they're going to be a certain demographic, exactly. So and understanding from them what will make a difference in terms of this information, how will it improve your health outcomes. So that's what sort of information would make a difference, but what sort of format would help make it more engaging for you. And depending on the group, they're going to say different things, because a lot of people will say, oh, I like visual, I like interactive, but if there's visual impairment in a particular group, then of course you'd go for a different format. And to your point, there will always be the people who are digitally native and those who aren't. So to Claudia's point, you work with a variety of formats, and I think what we'd say is where you use digital, it's not going to be right for everyone, but hopefully it's taking away some of the pressure on the clinicians so that they can spend the time face-to-face with the people who need it. So, sorry, I've just hijacked. I'm not meant to be the person being the panel.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Lady there, yes?
Thank you for sharing your experience. I have a question about medical sales, so perhaps it's more for Claudia. So you mentioned back in the day it's different than now. So can you tell us a bit more about when you did medical sales with the drugs, and what was your approach at the time, and what was your daily task, for example?
Sure, great question. So I think when I did sales, it's more similar to how it is now, because it wasn't that long ago. Because remember, I kind of went on a path of clinical first and then changed. So I was doing sales back in maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. But how it was before, it was around as much share of voice as possible. What that means is, how many times can I see the same doctor and pester them with the same message? And here's my flashy detail aid, which basically is like a brochure saying why you should buy my drug. And usually we used to laugh because there's always a lighthouse as a picture, or something, isn't there? It's always the same. It's always the same on these drug brochures. And you go in and you say, oh, I've got, this is a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago, oh, I've got I don't know, a USB stick for you that's free, or I've got, pens, and I've got all sorts of things with your brand name on it, and you want them to use it. I'm sure you probably still go to doctors' offices where they still have them from years ago, where the pad of paper with the name of the drug. So that's all gone now. You can't do that anymore, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's more around, first of all, listening and asking questions and understanding. I think Caroline said it very well, and really understanding what's the challenge that's going on there in order to support patient outcomes, and especially with the disease area you're dealing with, but also understanding more holistically, because it's not about us. So if I'm going in to talk about a lung cancer product, I need to understand what else is this clinician doing, because a lot of lung cancer clinicians in the UK are also treating kidney cancer, for example. So you need to understand what's their whole life, because you might just be a speck in their day. So you need to understand where you fit in and how you can support. And once you truly understand that clinician, then you can go away and plan and think, okay, what do we have to offer? Not only the product, but also the services we have in terms of benefits. We used to call them benefits beyond the pill, which is programs that you can put into place, or organizing meetings. So you might get a few different hospitals together and organize a meeting so that they can exchange information and you have a guest speaker. There's all sorts of projects that you can do in order to add value. It's less so about going in and just pushing your messages, because we talk a lot about a value proposition. And a value proposition, it has two sides. It has the side of the clinician, has the side of the company, and value sits in the middle, right? So where the two things intersect. So that's what you are really there to do. You're there to add value, knowing that you're going to benefit patient outcomes, which eventually will benefit the company in the long run anyway, because you become trusted, they become, satisfied with the company, loyal, and there's all this data, especially in other industries, that says the more satisfied people are, the more they will come to you for support and for help, etc.
Just to follow up a little bit, did you back in the day? Did you have like sales target, and also did you use like statistical method, like for data analysis, to inform your decision for your approach?
Yes, great question. So yes, you do have sales target in most therapy areas, but not all, because there's an ethical implication. So for example, in antibiotics, you do not want to have a sales target, because we're trying to fight against antimicrobial resistance. And there's other therapy areas like that. So then you have other types of objectives. But in most, you will have a sales target, and you will have all the data for you to make an informed decision of how you business plan. So you account plan and you business plan along with the sales manager around where you should focus your efforts and how to drive the business forward. Because at the end of the day, pharmaceutical companies are not nonprofits, right? They're commercial entities.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Gentleman over here.
Thank you for your talk. That really brought back memories, because my very first job was as a med rep for Sandoz, and that was many, many moons ago. But my question is to do with pharmacists. I don't know what advice or what opportunities you'd have for two sets of pharmacists, the newly qualified pharmacist and the later career pharmacist. I don't know if, obviously we're talking pharmaceutical marketing here, but just wanting to find out what the scope is in terms of qualified pharmacists.
I think that's a really good question, and I'd like to ask the audience, how many of you are trained as pharmacists or working in pharmacy?
Okay.
That's really interesting, thank you. Thanks.
That is really interesting. My content director was a pharmacist. So that's her role. And it's great to have her in the team, because the insight that she brings, because obviously now there is a shift and pressure on pharmacists, and a shift in their role within the NHS. So having that insight does really help us. But so I would say it's more towards, it could be strategy, it could be content. It really depends on the individual. And she came to us, and we just knew that she was the right person to fit within our team. So, but there are definitely roles within healthcare comms.
And from a pharma perspective, it would be probably, you could go anywhere, but probably more valued on the medical side. So not the marketing side, but the medical side. And there's various roles. So there's the MSL, which is a medical scientific liaison, which they're usually in the field, kind of like the scientific version of a sales rep, I guess, but very different roles. I don't want to say that they're a scientific sales rep, they're not. But doing things like investigator-initiated trials and supporting with that, and education on the pipeline of the company. But then if you move in-house, you can work in medical affairs and work in various different projects and types of things. And in the UK, you can become a medical signatory as well. What that means is you're signing off content. So any piece of content that's created by a pharmaceutical company has to be signed off to make sure that it's accurate and the claims can be claimed versus the clinical trials. And the only people that can do that are doctors or pharmacists. So if you look at the ABPI, which is the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industry, you can become accredited as a final signatory, which is a very sought after skill set.
There aren't enough of them.
There aren't enough of them ever, yeah. And there's always a backlog.
And I would actually recommend all of you to have a look at the ABPI. And I think the web address is abpi.org. So have a look at that. It's a really useful resource.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just going to say you can get a copy of the code in booklet mailed to you for free as well. So if you're interested in seeing the code that pharmaceutical companies have to follow.
You can download as well if you want to be environmentally friendly. I know.
Absolutely. We have a question from the lady up there.
Hello, Caroline, and hello, Claudia. Excited to meet you. I have a couple of questions, but first one is for Caroline. Why did you choose Curtsy and Kirsty? Curtsy, the name.
Okay, so Cutsy and Cutsy, my business partner is my brother.
Okay.
His surname is Cuts because that was my maiden cname. And at school, I was always Cutsy's little sister. There you go.
Thank you, thank you. And second one is for Claudia. You said you have been involved in marketing strategies. So when you first meet a client, like if it's a new client altogether and you do not have, you have not met them before, how do you approach them? And what are the ideas? I mean, do you have an approach to meet a new client regarding the strategy, or how does it work for you?
Yeah, great question. I think just like as pharmaceutical companies should be approaching their customers, we do the same in terms of we need to understand what are their biggest challenges and what are their pain points, and therefore how we can solve it. But it depends what it is. You know, we have lots of frameworks that we've created on how we go about, you know, diagnosing the problem if they don't truly understand what it is, and then coming up with solutions. So we have this kind of 5D model that we use. There's all sorts of strategies. But in all of our proposals to our pharmaceutical clients, our first phase is always discovery. And discovery means asking them so many questions and getting all sorts, because if you ask them what they want, they'll tell you, but it's not actually what they need. So you need to get under the skin and understand, and then try to get them to see that actually what they need is something different, which is interesting, because I think we had discussed this ahead of time, like what's the difference on working on agency side versus pharma side, and it's different personalities and things that you need for either side. I don't know if we have time to go into that. Yeah, do you want to do that? So, so I guess in talking about pharmaceutical side, my perspective is that you need to be more of a generalist, because especially if you're in a marketing side, you are coordinating a lot of the functions across the company. You need to understand how you manage senior stakeholders. You need to motivate potentially a sales team if you're working in marketing. If you're working in medical or regulatory, you're a bit more specialized, but you need to kind of understand all of that, and usually have an ambition to progress. It doesn't have to be up, because that's not how careers work anymore. It's more of a matrix and moving across the organization. Whereas if you work on the agency side, and I'd be interested to hear your view as well, Caroline, I think your ego has to be a little bit at the door, because it's about what the client wants. And sometimes you, from your experience, you think you know what they should do, but ultimately it's their decision. And our role is to make them look good and to drive performance of whether it's their brand or their team or so on. So you might get the odd, oh yeah, thanks, great job, you know, and they get the next promotion and they get, you know, awards and everything else. So if you are not motivated by that, if you need all the accolades yourself, then probably agency is not the right role for you. And you might need to be more of a specialist, I'd say, depending on, you know, what we do at Possible is very specialist. I'd imagine what you do is specialist as well. So more of a subject matter expert, I would say, rather than a generalist.
I would add that it is about, I would say there are lots of sort of specialist roles within agency, but you can move across. So you might start in client service and actually find that you're more of a writer. We've had people move around within the business and finding the right role for them, but sort of getting your foot in the door to start off with is always get some experience under your belt. But I would agree with you. And I think agency life can be very, very busy because you have client deadlines. So you'll hear some clients later. But it is very, very busy and can be quite stressful in my experience compared to having worked. The stresses are different. It's, you know, it's good and the people you work with are great and you come together with. So we have designers, we have writers. So we've got like these amazing creative brains who completely work in a different way. My background science. So, you know, when you bring all those different skills together, you can create some fantastic stuff. So, but it is very different and much more deadline driven, I would say.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, thank you very much indeed, both of you. I'd love you all to give a round of applause for Claudia and Caroline. Thank you.